What I wanted to go over today is how to use VLOOKUP in Excel, and this works for both PC and Mac and is a real time saver if you ever have to match up like values in cells but don't have them actually line up with one another. And here's a good example. Let's say you have two different months, May and June, both for a list of sellers and the sales that they've made. This is a simple example, but you can see that there are not as many sellers. Even though it's from the original list, there aren't quite as many in June as there is in May. So how do you line those up? Well, you could obviously eyeball it and say, oh, John has 264 sales in June, so I just had to add that to this. Obviously that would be extremely cumbersome to do it, either eyeballing it or even putting it out here somewhere. Or you could take all the names, paste them out beside, and then try and line them up by inserting different lines. But you can see what kind of a pain that would be as well. So that's where VLOOKUP comes into play. So what you're going to want to do is you can either do it via the formula bar, which I'll do here, or later, once you learn it, you don't have to look it up via the formula. You can simply type it in. But I'll go through the steps here. You essentially select whatever range it is that you want to be able to integrate with another range. And up here where you have your, essentially it's telling you whatever cell you're in, that's where you're going to put the name for this group or range of cells. So, and usually this is actually naming an array. So by habit, I usually call it just array 1, and then if I make another one, array 2, array 3, and so on. So you just put the name of it in and then hit enter, and you can tell that when that's selected, you see array up there. If you go in and select array, it selects that chunk there. So, and then what you're going to do is, let's say we're going to put it right next to where the other sales are. And that's where we want it to populate what sales John, Sue, Sally, Alan, all those people had, and skip over the ones that didn't have any sales because they weren't represented in the June's list. That's essentially what a VLOOKUP does. So here we are, we're selecting the cell that we want to begin it in, and just going to hit the little formula bar here. You can see most recently uses VLOOKUP, but you can also do the search function for it. Just go into search, and VLOOKUP will come up pretty quickly. And you'll double click on that, and you could go over and select, and on Windows this is a little bit different, but you can select as it's asking you to select for each one, or you can simply type it in. And the good thing about typing it in is, A, you'll get in the habit a little faster, I think, but also it gives you the little cheat sheet here. So first of all, what's your lookup value, your array, your index, etc. So it's telling you what you need to look for. Well, the lookup value is essentially asking, what do you want me to look at to compare to? Well, in that case, I want you to look at A3. That's the beginning of it. So we just put an A3. And comma, the table array is looking for the array we just named. So that would be array 1. And then the column index number, what that is asking for is, within the array that you've named, what column is going to be the output for whatever matches up. And in this case, we want that to be sales. We want it to just say seller matching up John with John. We want John to match up with the sales that he's made in the subsequent month. So it's going to be the second one. So that you just put a 2. And that's all that information that this one actually needs right now. You hit enter, and you see that John is filled in with what his June sales were. And then when we autofill the rest of it, just by double clicking, or you can drag it down when you have the little black cross, either way, it leaves off the people who didn't have any because they weren't represented in the June sales altogether, but then still fills in all the values for the people who were. Now what you can do there is you can simply copy and then paste only values, and then even if you want to after that, you could do a replacing the NA with nothing, and then you'll have it simply leave off where there's simply nothing for that. Or you could have it replace it with 0, whatever you want to replace it with to represent that indeed Sue and Vaughn and Mary and Vicky and Bill didn't have any sales in the subsequent month. And then you go and you can see now it's just the values. No longer it says VLOOKUP, so it's not going to be restricted by that at all, even though your array is still named up here. So essentially that's the easiest way that a VLOOKUP works, but you can imagine the possibilities that it has. And an HLOOKUP, or horizontal lookup, works essentially the same way, except instead of up and down, it's just going from side to side.